Okay, this is going to be a little bit of a different kind of video, and I'm very excited about it. This is a fun one. So look, I'm in a nice comfortable chair because we're going to be answering your questions. I put out a little thing on YouTube, a little post asking for your questions. I thought we'd do a fun Tutorial Tuesday for the end of the year where you could ask me anything. And there are some good ones. There are some really good ones. So we're going to get through as many as we can. We also put this out on Facebook, so there's a bunch of questions there as well. And you know, we'll just keep going. We're just going to get into it. So get yourself some kind of drink. Maybe it's a cup of tea, right? Maybe it's a glass of wine. I don't mind. It's the end of the year. It's Christmas almost. So let's get crazy with it. So let's strap in because this is one of the most fun episodes of Tutorial Tuesday, I hope, anyway. I mean, I obviously haven't filmed it yet. I hope it is. But before we go any further, let me just do the thing. It's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday, we bring you a brand new fresh photography tutorial. This week, of course, is not a photography tutorial. We're going to talk about some stuff, and I'm excited about it. Let's dive in. Now, you guys were fantastic, I've got to say. Really lovely questions. Let's get into it. Now, we're going to start with the questions that were asked on YouTube. Now, there's one question that was asked more than any other, both on the actual post I put out asking for questions and on quite a few videos recently, which I've got to say, guys, I really appreciate. I really appreciate you noticing, number one, and you feeling like you're just going to pop it in there. I've had a lot of positivity about this. And that is essentially about my weight loss. Now, we're just going to address that first and foremost, and I'm going to give you a good answer as well. I'm not going to give you a rubbish answer. I'm going to give you a good answer. So Roger A.V. Hansen wrote in saying it's more of a personal question, and if it's too personal, I totally understand. I appreciate that, but it's not. Don't worry about it. We've all noticed that you physically changed a bit lately. Was wondering what's the secret to a successful lifestyle change, and more specifically, how did you do it? Now, we did then have a couple of replies, follow-ups to that. I appreciate that. And Blue172 writes in saying, I was going to ask the same question. You're looking great. Give us the key. Well, I will tell you exactly what the situation is. I'm going to give you a good answer as well, a proper answer. So you might know, depending on how long you've been watching the channel, I've been a big guy for a while, right? Most of my adult life, actually, I have been overweight and arguably considerably overweight. And especially in the pandemic, I did get really quite chunky, if I'm honest with you. I'm sure a lot of us put on weight in the pandemic, you know, with the lockdowns, stress eating, couldn't go out and do exercise. It was a pretty bad time, and I did get pretty big. Now, I knew that I needed to do something about that because it's just not ideal, right? In a lot of different ways, but especially for my health as well. So we started by getting another dog. We already had one little dog, but he loved sleeping, eating treats, and sitting on the sofa watching TV with me, which was not as helpful as it could have been. So we got a border collie named Nala, who has now been in a bunch of videos. And she really helped because I had to go out and exercise her. And I lost quite a bit of weight. I actually lost probably somewhere between 3 and 4 stone, actually just walking with her, which is quite a lot. Even so, I was still quite considerably overweight. And even if you look back to videos earlier this year, so at the beginning of the summer, I was pretty big. And it just wasn't good for my health. And eventually that started to catch up with me. And I would say in the space of about maybe a month, 6 weeks, I had some pretty big health scares, one after the other. It's 3 in total. And it was very intense and very, very scary. And it really shook me enough that I said to myself, okay, there's other stuff that needs to be done health-wise. Got to attend some appointments now, got to look at some stuff. But I do also need to address things within myself and just do it. So actually that was June that happened. And since then I just completely changed my diet. So I cut out most sugar because I was eating far too much of it. I cut out all the fun stuff. So chips, pizza, all that stuff, and swapped it for a lot of greens, a lot of salads, a lot of things like chicken and fish. We swapped actually within my household to eating home-cooked meals every day instead of really any processed food. And I started working out pretty much every day. It started with every other day, but it very quickly became every day because when you've got that level of fear, right, it's a great driver. It's fantastic for getting you down the gym. right? Because you're just thinking to yourself, I've got to go out of the gym. And it really is as simple as that. It's a lot of hard work, I guess, but on the other side of things, it's very straightforward. It's just been a lot of diet change where I've just been eating as healthy as I possibly can pretty much all of the time. Did I miss the sugar at first? Yeah, I did. But I will say this, it was quite quick how much I started having a lot more energy. I am often now bouncing off the walls all the time. And I have just basically switched out things like sugar addiction, coffee addiction, all that stuff for exercise addiction. That's not the healthiest way to do it, but it's a better addiction, I guess, than all those other things which arguably were really badly affecting my health. So now I just work out pretty much every day at the gym, which I love doing. I'm actually now trying to build up muscle mass as well. So this is quite a long-winded answer, but essentially, yes, it has been a lot of salads and a lot of working out. And yes, I do still walk Nala every day for at least probably I'd say an hour to an hour and a half, sometimes more. It's a bit rubbish in the winter, but in the summer it was lovely. And that has made a big difference. But I just want to say, I massively appreciate there's been a lot of positive comments and it has been lovely, especially when I was going through a little bit of a scary time. And then you guys started commenting saying that I was looking good, I was doing well. You have no idea how much of a pick me up that was. That was a big thing. And I love how much of a community it feels like we have. So I really appreciate every one of you, every single one of you. So not to get too soppy about it, but I really, really appreciated that. That was a big thing in my life. Okay, that was a good question and one that actually a lot of people have asked, like I say, over the last few months. So I'm glad to have addressed it. Let's move on to the next one. Now, B Biggs wrote in saying, if you were only allowed to shoot with one prime lens in 2024, which one would you choose? Easy answer, 50mm. Perfect world, 50mm f1.4, but I'd go for a 50mm 1.8 if that was the only one that was available. A nifty 50, a reasonably cheap nifty 50. Why? Well, I'll tell you why. I used to be massively into 85mm. I love a tighter focal length. I love lens compression. I love everything it does for portraits. I love the way it works for landscape. I love using them for street photography. I just find wider lenses more difficult to shoot with because I find it more difficult to focus in, no pun intended, on a subject. That said, 85mm, 135, something like that might be a little bit too restrictive if I was just using one lens. So you get 50mm. Now, is that a boring answer? Absolutely, because it's the all-rounder, right? It's the all-rounder nifty 50, but it's the all-rounder for a reason. I love the look of a 50mm. If I could only go 1.8, I'd go 1.8, but if I could go 1.4, that's what I'm doing. Do I need 1.2? Probably not. I don't think so. I think 50mm, 1.4. What would you use? I'd love to know. Down in the comments. Essex County Photo wrote in with a really interesting question about DSLR cameras and the slow death of DSLR cameras, which, yeah, sorry to say it, but it feels like it, doesn't it? Having drooled over the 1DX Mark III for years and having finally blown all my savings on a decent secondhand one and a few old L lenses, do you guys think it would get harder, if not impossible, to get them serviced or repaired in the years to come? That's a really interesting question. That's not something I had really thought about in the past, but it is a really, yeah, it's a poignant question, isn't it? So the truth is that a brand like Canon, realistically, no, I don't think there'll be a problem with that for a long, long time. I think, you know, if you still have a 1DX Mark III in 20 years, it might start to be a little bit more difficult. But I think because it's a Canon, that should be readily available, at least from Canon specifically, to be serviced for a long time to come. I don't think that they'll stop doing that. I also think realistically that'd be a PR disaster. So I think probably you're in completely safe hands. I think that there will be a time when it's more difficult for sure, only because I think obviously everyone's switching to mirrorless. The mirrorless switch has already happened, and it's certainly the way things are going. But no, I think you're absolutely fine with the 1DX Mark III, which, by the way, amazing camera. I mean, if that's the DSLR you're going to go for, amazing camera. And then second of all, you know, that thing is a tank. That can take a lot of punishment. But no, I don't think you're going to have any trouble for a long time with servicing that camera. And I think probably by the time you start to have trouble with that, I think it'll be so far from now that you'll want to go for something else, which will be an upgrade from the 1DX Mark III. I'm sure there'll be some crazy specification that I can't even really imagine right now. And part of that, I think, is because very sensibly, you've gone for a very reputable brand in Canon and a very big brand. So they're not going anywhere, which I think is a big part of it. And they're definitely going to want to have that available to be serviced for a long time. So I think you're fine. Right, next question. We've got a few here from Sam Taylor's, and they're good questions, so we're going to go through them. A few ideas. First one, most used piece of new kit in 2023. Oh, that's a really interesting one. So obviously the kit I use all the time is my Sony a7 III and a 24-70 f2.8, but I've been doing that most days, to be honest with you, since 2018. So that's not exactly new. I've used the R5 a lot more this year, so the Canon R5, a lot more than I have any other previous year, and I've really enjoyed using that. But it's not a new piece of kit that I use kind of all the time. When I've had access to it, I've really enjoyed using it. To be completely honest with you, I'm a little bit of and this question is making me realize it, a little bit of a stick in the mud for new kit. I've pretty much stayed with the same kit over the last 2 or 3 years completely. I think you get into a routine, right? A rhythm with your kit. I think I will probably upgrade my camera and lens maybe next year, because I think it's coming to time. I use the camera so much, it's crazy. It's amazing that it still works basically perfectly. I've dropped the lens onto rock. It's not ideal. It's not ideal. I can't believe this stuff is still fine. Next year will be the year that I probably upgrade my camera, which is quite exciting. And then I'll have some proper new kit to talk about. What will I go for? I don't know. Maybe the Nikon Z8 will. We'll see. What would you go for right now? What would you go for right now? If you need a hybrid camera, versatile all-rounder, what would you go for? Best new tip or trick that you've learned in 2023? Honestly, this really comes down to photo editing, actually. So there's a lot of new techniques that I use that I've learned in Lightroom just from constantly editing photos. And for me, as a photographer, I love the edit. I love editing photos. I'll always approach most photography thinking about the edit now. It's really my favorite part of the whole thing. I love the actual act and the art of going to capture the photo, but it's the edit for me. I love the edit. And some of the new tips and tricks, which I've done Tutorial Tuesdays on actually. So things like using intersecting masks, that has changed the way that I do photo editing, especially to be able to do things like apply a gradient mask, but only have it intersect with the subject is a big deal. It's a really big deal. And I've really enjoyed learning that stuff and then also making videos about that. How has your approach to photography changed in 2023? Well, I think actually I've almost kind of answered it there, which is that I think much more about the edit now while I'm taking photos. I'm really almost in that headspace of how am I going to make this look? And actually, I think while taking photos, sometimes they can look a little bit, not rubbish, but a little bit dull, a little bit not that exciting because I'm already 1 foot into the photo edit, where I know exactly what I'm going to do. I've got a full plan for exactly how I want this final image to look. And I'm taking the photo with that in mind, which has its ups and downs, right? On the one hand, it would be good to try and get the photo as good as possible in the moment. But sometimes there's not a lot you can do about that. Sometimes the photo is what it is. But on the other hand, shooting for the edit, knowing that I love editing, knowing that I'm going to do that, allows me to really consider all of those points of view while I am actually taking the photo. And so that really informs the way I shoot. And actually another way that my approach to photography has changed in 2023, for sure, is learning and deliberately shooting wider than I would often shoot, because I love going in quite tight, but I'll often find that I come back to the computer and I'm like, oh, I wish there was a little bit more space. And I wish I just zoomed out a little bit. So now I do. I can go in, because we're not shooting on film, right? I can zoom in, take the photo, but then zoom out a bit, take a slightly wider version, maybe even then go again and just take another wider version. Number one, it allows me more options later when I come to edit the photo. And number two, it just stops me having the regret, especially if you're in the moment with perfect light, great, beautiful sunset. Why not take a few different photos with a little bit more, a little bit wider, a little bit tighter, mix up the composition as well, just change things up a bit. That's kind of how I've changed my perspective on how I'm gonna take photos. I wanna give myself the maximum number of options when it comes to that photo edit, which I guess is me thinking about the photo edit ahead of time. What are you most excited about for 2024? Oh, that's a great question. Do you know what I'm excited about is to see where we're gonna be this time next year, because I don't think I could have predicted where we are now at the end of last year, if that makes sense. I'm talking about AI, I'm talking about global shutter. This stuff is really exciting, and I'm really keen to see where's it gonna go in another 12 months. The AI part of it is equal parts scary and fascinating because I think we're already at a point where it can win contests, right? It can fool judges. So what happens next year with that? That's really fascinating. And then things like global shutter, I didn't see that coming at all. I just didn't see that coming this year. So what will that look like this time next year? Will we have more cameras with the global shutter? How will that kind of progress? It's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. It's so fast moving everything that it's just really exciting to see where we'll be this time next year. I can't wait, to be honest with you. It's very exciting. Okay, we're gonna switch over to Facebook now, where we also put out the post, and we've got a good question from Joseph right here. Will a home printer degrade an image from a top-end camera? Great question. Oh, that's an interesting one. Now, this is something that I think a year ago, or maybe just a little over a year ago, I wouldn't have been able to answer because I didn't really do a lot of printing. But I have been much more interested in printing over the last year. I've printed some stuff here. I've used some Canon printers. I've had some stuff printed at Pod Cameras, actually, where we do printing in our lab. And it's a really interesting, not only a great art form, actually, but a really interesting way to expand your photography just generally, because there's something very different about holding your own work, right? Your own photo as a print. Now, the answer to this varies so massively. Probably, to really boil it down, the answer is probably not. It probably won't degrade an image from a top-end camera, depending on what kind of home printer you mean, and depending on a bunch of other stuff as well. If you mean literally just like an inkjet printer, where you print it out onto normal paper, yeah, it's not gonna look as good. There's just no way, kind of, you know, it's just not gonna happen. But if you mean various different levels of printer that you could get, Canon, Epson, there's lots of different printers that you can get, and even the lower end, cheaper ones are actually going to give you a good result. The way I think about printing now is very different to the way I used to think about it with regards to what's actually going to come out is not going to be exactly what you see on the screen, because you're going to make a lot of choices about what you want to come out of that printer. The type of paper. So is it going to be glossy? Is it going to be matte? Is it, you know, how much shine do you want in it? Basically, the kind of inks you're using. And yeah, of course, the kind of printer you use as well is going to affect it, both in terms of the size of it and also the quality of it. And it's not necessarily going to degrade the image quality, it's just going to look a certain way. It also depends how you've got your monitor and your printer calibrated with regards to colors. There's a little bit of trial and error when it comes to printing, but I will tell you this, even if you go for a reasonably cheap printer, for example, the kind of cheaper Canon printer, I think it's the IP8750, I'll pop a link to it down in the description, will give you the opportunity to see your work in a whole different light. Honestly, I had gone years without printing my work, just looking at the computer, looking at my phone, and that's lovely. But to be honest, it completely changed the way I viewed everything when I started printing it myself. Oh, it's so exciting, using the inks and the papers and trying out different things to be able to trial and error, what you like, what you don't like. And then the best part of that, if you have your own printer, you can have a bunch of frames all around your home and you can swap out the pictures every 3 months, every 6 months, whatever you want to do. This has been an enormous amount of fun. I could keep going for hours, but to be honest, this video will have to end at some point, so we'll end it there. But if you enjoyed this, I'd love to know down in the comments. It's something a little bit different. We've not done a video quite, God, I'm talking my hands like crazy. Like crazy. But my point is, we've not done a video quite like this before, so I'd love to know what you think. Did you enjoy it? Would you like to see this again? If you do have any questions, maybe for the next time we do this video, pop them down in the comments, because I'd love to do this again. I've had a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. There's links to all the stuff we've discussed down in the description as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe. New content, loads of it for next year and this year. Don't worry about it. There's still content coming this year. But also next year, there's loads of stuff coming. I will see you in the next video. If I don't see you before, have a great Christmas, have a great New Year. There will be more videos, but if I miss you, if we don't see each other, have a really lovely one, and I'll see you later. But as always, thanks for watching.